Let's talk a little bit about getting good at those tricky little words. You know, them bloody prepositions. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, hello, I'm Julian Northbrook from doingenglish.com. Today, one of my clients asked me about prepositions. Although using my methods, she said, more on that in a moment, she's getting much better at prepositions. Sometimes, she said, she's still not sure which one to use and notices herself tripping up over them and worries about what people may think of her and her English because of that. So here is the three-part answer that I gave to her. First of all, and we're going to kind of start at the end here, people actually notice your errors with things like prepositions far less than you actually think that they do. Because we're not focused, for the most part, on the details of what you are saying. We are focused on the overall meaning. And this is why, of course, in previous videos, I've said that if you want to get good at comprehending English, whether it's reading or listening or what have you, you really need to be focusing on the overall meaning, not on surface level details. But a lot of the time, we're actually just focused on what you are saying, what you are talking about. We are losing ourselves in the story that you're telling, in the content that you are delivering to us, in the information that you are teaching us, and although we may notice occasionally that, oh, that wasn't quite native-like, oh, she made an error of a pronunciation or used a preposition that wasn't quite how we expected it, for the most part, these things just go shoo over the top of our heads. So, don't worry about it too much. The more you worry about these things, the worse it's going to get. And this is not to say that you can just say, fuck it, I'm just going to use any prepositions. I'm going to just stick the bloody things in there at random. Because that won't do you any good and you'll just form bad habits long term that are really hard to break. And if you really start to not care about your mistakes, then yeah, people will start to notice. But if you get anxious about it and if you start to worry about it and you start to get all like, oh my god, what if I make a mistake with my prepositions? Then, well, what's going to happen is you're going to make more mistakes because you're going to slip into inefficient, conscious ways of speaking, and that's just really not going to do you any good whatsoever. Now, how can we actually get good at using prepositions in a native-like way? Okay, let's talk about that. First of all, what you've got to understand is that, as with any kind of grammar, prepositions are first and foremost to do with the way that we think, the way that we see the world. Now, what do I mean by that exactly? Well, a great example, it's not a preposition, it's a function word, and most function words are kind of the same, but a very easy to understand example of this is in Japanese. The words kore and sore refer to this and that. And although they're not quite exactly the same, the word kore refers to the word this, and the word sore refers to the word that. Imagine I am watching TV. I'm watching a cooking show. My hero, the one and only Gordon Ramsay, is on the telly, cooking up some delicious dish, swearing like a sailor as he does it. I look at the TV and I think, oh, that looks good. And I say, hey, Mrs. Northbrook, that looks delicious. And if I'm talking in English, then that is a very natural thing to say. But if I'm talking in Japanese, that would be a very unnatural, incorrect thing to say. You see, in Japanese, this is not a that relationship, it's actually a this relationship. So if I said, sore wa oishisou, it actually sounds quite unnatural, where if I say, kore wa oishisou, this looks delicious, then that would be the natural, correct thing to say. This is a problem for me, because no matter how many times I say in Japanese, this looks delicious whilst looking at the TV, it still sounds wrong to me because my fundamental understanding of the world around me, my understanding of the relationship between me and the objects in my life and what's on them in the case of a TV, tells me that this is a that situation, not a this situation. Well, Japanese people see it in a completely different way. Now, I know this video is about prepositions, and this and that technically aren't prepositions, they're actually demonstratives, but the point is exactly the same. Getting good at prepositions or any kind of grammar word is largely, in fact more really, about learning to think in the way that an English speaker thinks. Learning to perceive the world and the relationships between you and the things in that world in the way that a native English speaker does. And when you begin to do that, developing your knowledge of English and the knowledge of the way that English speakers use English over time, you will naturally begin to use them better. That said, there is a way that we can massively speed up the process of getting prepositions right, and that brings me to point number 3. Chunks. I've said it time and time again. It's all about chunks, chunking. That is how native speakers speak. We are not speaking in individual words linked together with grammar rules that we calculate and process in our head as we're speaking. This is not what native speakers are doing. We don't speak like that. We speak largely, for the most part, using large blocks of prefabricated bits of language. Think of like big bits of Lego blocks that you use to make a castle or a truck or whatever the hell you're trying to make out of Lego. Yes, you could use these little tiny individual bits and do it like that, but you don't. We've got bigger blocks that we can go, okay, that's a great big bit, stick that on top, and that's how language works as well. We are storing chunks, large blocks of language in long-term memory and pulling them out, using them as are, linking them together. And the advantage of learning in this way in the first place is that prepositions take care of themselves, because if you are speaking in chunks, well, you've learned it as a single block and all the prepositions are just stuck in there. If you're an Extraordinary English Speakers member, if you look down in the description below this video, I've put links to a series of lessons in EES that focus specifically on, yeah, you've guessed it, prepositions and the tools that we use for digging deep into them. So if you're already a member and you haven't seen those lessons yet, because they are quite old now, they're in the archives, check them out. Right, that's it from me, Julian Northbrook, for another video. Head over to doingenglish.com, stick your email address in the box provided, and sign up to my free, legendary, and somewhat notorious daily emails. I send tips for speaking better English at 8 AM Island time every single day. If you found this useful, give it a nice big old thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs up anyway. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you, my friend, in the next video. Bye-bye.